Really interesting day, guys. Fractional gains on the S&P here, but big moves in the bond market.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the economic story is so crucial today when we look at the data that we got from ADP and from ISM. I'm also just focused on what we got from the Congressional Budget Office today, indications that the House passed big, beautiful bill, to use the president's term, would add $2.4 trillion to the deficit. Just interested, guys, how that's going to kind of color the job that the Senate has right now as it tries to piece together its version of that legislation, with the president's goal here of getting that bill on his desk by July the 4th, when I think we can call a wildly ambitious goal, but we see the Senate kind of working at it now, and I wonder the effect that's going to have on them as they kind of haggle over it and hash it all out.
Yeah, David, I mean, you mentioned the weaker economic data. It was interesting that for a lot of the trading day, the S&P 500 was able to climb higher, even though it showed that economic data was weaker. But into the close now, you're starting to see the trade reflect that.
Well, it's funny. It feels like the bond market and the stock market have been talking past each other for a while right now. And Romaine, that certainly was the story for the bulk of this trading session today.
Absolutely. So we should point out there are some pretty big gainers, particularly when it comes to the semiconductor space. But you are seeing weakness in other parts of tech, including Tesla and CrowdStrike, Dollar Tree among one of the biggest decliners here on the day. You add it up all together here, and you basically got a market, let's just say it, guys, really going nowhere on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average giving up about 80 points, or about 0.2% as we wait for these numbers to settle. The S&P 500 right now straddling the line between gains and losses, 59.70.84 on your screen. But once again, that number could adjust just a bit. If it stays where it is, that is basically unchanged on the day. The NASDAQ Composite up about 62 points, or 0.3%. Similar gains for the NASDAQ 100. And to the downside, transports, mid-caps, and the Russell 2000. The Russell 2000 down 0.2%.
Romaine, as you say that, I'm looking to see sort of how much green there is on the screen, how much red there is on the screen. 241 of the S&P 500, 244, higher than they were at the beginning of the day. 257 of those stocks down, one unchanged. So a real mix in keeping with what you've been describing here, the way that the market is kind of muddled through today.
Yeah, and let's put that in sector terms as well and take a look at this circle right here. You can see there's a lot of green. You have information technology, certainly a big proportion of that. What did the best on the day actually was communication services. You can see that green is a little bit brighter than the others. And then you have some sectors you don't necessarily always see leading also in the green. Materials and real estate. Real estate obviously makes sense with that big bond move. On the downside, you do have energy off by about almost 2% as a total sector. Utilities also in the red in a big way, off by about 1.7%, David.
Let me take you through some of the gainers that I've been looking at today, starting with BKNG Booking Holdings. I love a Delaware-based holding company here. This owns Booking.com, Priceline.com, Kayak, and the rest. Obviously, we're focused on the way the travel companies are dealing with the economic uncertainty and the kind of contours of the trade war. JP Morgan maintaining it with an overweight, raising the price target there from 53.60 to 6,000. So one that I've been following this afternoon.
All right, one other mover here on the day is Five Below. They dropped about 0.8% in the regular cash session. The share is moving even lower now in the after-hours trade after its earnings just crossed the wire. The company said the first quarter EPS did come in at about 75 cents a share. That is a beat, so that is certainly good. But here's your guidance going forward. For the second quarter, the company says it expects a range on EPS of 45 cents to 57 cents a share. The street on average was looking for 58 cents. So the high end of that range is below the average of street estimates. As for sales and revenue here, comp sales, excuse me, let me just go back to the full year here. They are providing a full year sales figure, net sales 4.33 to 4.42 billion. That actually, believe it, is actually above its previous guidance that it had given of 4.2 to 4.33. So you add it up all together, you had a beat in the quarter, but the guidance going forward seems to suggest some weakness on the bottom line, though they do seem to be guiding a little bit higher on the top line.
A lot of interest in those trendy fund and affordable finds at Five Below, it seems. Let me turn to another stock I've been watching today, but also over the course of the year. That's Netflix. We saw UBS raise its price target on Netflix to $14.50. UBS citing secular trends and competitive dynamics remaining supportive of Netflix's ability to drive stronger monetization and operating leverage. And just to give a little bit more color here, Netflix up 40%, nearly 40% this year. And I'll stick with companies based on the West Coast. Do Meta as my last gainer here. Saw a price target hike from JP Morgan a day after a company announced a partnership with Constellation Energy. Talked a lot about that yesterday, but that 20-year deal that it brokered for nuclear power going forward, and I think kind of encapsulates this company's interest, doubled down interest here in using AI and using AI for advertising in particular.
Okay, let's get to some of the decliners. CrowdStrike dropping over 5% today. This is a cybersecurity company that projected revenue for the current period that trailed estimates. They see sales for the second quarter will be as much as $1.15 billion, just slightly missing estimates of $1.16 billion. This, of course, was the first financial update since the company announced it would cut about 5% of its global workforce. Later in the trading day, we also got a headline out of this company that they said the DOJ and the SEC sent inquiries on firm accounting. The firm, though, said that they are cooperating with the inquiry, but that stock, again, down over 5% today. Dollar Tree was another company with a warning out today. They warned investors that their second quarter profit could be down as much as 50% from a year ago as it deals with tariff-related costs. Dollar Tree, not to be confused with Dollar General. Dollar General generates about 80% of sales from food and consumable goods, which are less reliant on imports. Dollar Tree gets almost half of its revenue from those categories. It's more reliant on goods from other countries, so they are more exposed to that hit.
I do want to get to some other earnings. We just got through Five Below. Let's turn our attention to MongoDB coming out with their results. They boosted their full year adjusted EPS forecast. They also beat estimates. Their first quarter adjusted EPS came in at $1.06. The estimate had been for just 67 cents, so quite a beat there. You take a look at their full year adjusted EPS. They see it between $2.94 to $3.12. Previously, they had seen $2.44 to $2.62. So quite a big beat there. And you're certainly seeing that in the after-hour movement in the shares, up about 9% at the moment there.
Yeah, this was a much-needed bid for MongoDB. This stock was down 14% year to date through today's close. So we'll see how those gains translate into tomorrow's trading session. But just back on the decliners, my last one is not a stock. It's an ETF. Uh-oh. Katie's going to like this.
Go off.
I did this for us. XLE. This is an energy stock ETF. Energy was the worst performing sector in the S&P 500 today. We saw stocks across that sector retreating along with crude oil prices after Saudi Arabia is now pushing for more supersized output hikes from the OPEC Plus group of producing countries. Marathon Petroleum, Valero were some of those names that were dropping. And of course, that ETF down, closing the day almost down 2%.
All right, we have to talk, of course, about what we saw in yields because we came into today. Yields were higher, but only fractionally. It looked like we weren't really going to get any real movement in yields, and that changed in a big way right around 8:15 a.m. New York time on the back of that ADP report, and the decline accelerated once we got to 10 a.m. And that ISM services report. We basically went from yields higher to yields lower, down about 8 to 9 basis points between the 2 and your 10-year. And of course, you see that 30-year yield dropping about 10 basis points, a big revision. We should also point out in forecasts in the swap market for what the Fed may do next, pricing in the possibility of at least about 3 cuts this year, potentially, and now potentially more certainty for a cut by September. I do want to turn our attention to another story that was really just burning up the Bloomberg terminal. Have you been following this ship that's just out, apparently just drifting out there in the Pacific Ocean? It's full of electric vehicles. Apparently, it caught on fire. And of course, the crew realized, when you have a fire like that with those lithium batteries, you get the heck out of there. A big incident out there. We don't know exactly which cars are on there, do we? But this seems to be a repeat of what we saw. Remember, a while ago, I think that was, it was a couple years ago, when you had all those ships coming over from Europe, those cars coming over from Europe that sunk.
I will just say it's important to note that the U.S. Coast Guard did evacuate all 22 crew members, so now we're allowed to make a little bit of fun of this story. There were 800 EVs on this ship, 3,000 cars in total, and a large proportion of them, you guys, were EVs. So there you go.
There's a metaphor here somewhere, but I was struck as I read that piece and had to kind of imagine the ship bobbing about on flames, this conflagration in the open seas. That EV fires can take up to 8,000 gallons of water to cool. So yes, folks are gone. We can laugh at the circumstances itself here, but really an indication that this is a difficult thing that these shipping companies are having to deal with going forward. Yeah, and that other big one, of course, that was off the Dutch coast with those back in 2022. Of course, we were all wrapped by that incident as well. All right, guys, that does it for us. We'll let you get back to it there in the radio studio as we wrap up our cross-platform coverage on Bloomberg Television, Radio, and YouTube. And a reminder that Bloomberg Business Week is now on Bloomberg Originals. All 4 of us, or I think some combination of us, will be back same time tomorrow, same place. Thanks for watching.